Congratulations again on winning App of the Year. Has the
Yeah,
reality of it settled in yet?
it kind of has, kind of hasn't. It's yeah, like I say, reality feels a bit warped at the moment. So you know, I've kind of looked at like the magazine, all the ratings and things that's like set there, kind of leads to, I guess, why I want it. But there's still a sort of a part of you that, like, for most small businesses, I think you're into these kind of things just to get exposure. Um, but realistically, the chance of you winning, is like so slim. I often think back to, when I actually really thought I was going to win it. And that was for the MTN Awards. Okay. And I walked sort of away empty handed there. So, you're into these things and you assume, it's one of these things where if your app gets mentioned and stuff like that, you're getting exposure. You don't really expect to walk away. You look at all the big names there. I went to go look at like previous winners, which includes your Takealots, Mr. Delivery, Standard Bank, etc. These are big names. um, and it kind of you kind of sit and you think like, okay, so this has not happened. So where are you and where you're moving to now? Um, it hasn't changed the focus of what I'm doing. That's still very, very important, but it does kind of throw a spanner in the works as to what the perception kind of is. Um,
What do you mean? How
like
so?
like for example, it's all of a sudden, it's sort of like you're at the forefront of like fintech and technology, and there's still a part of me that like can't really believe that, like, all of a sudden it's um you're thrown into this position where people might look for you to advise and things like that, as far as global technology are. Yes, I'm arrogant enough to think I can take on the world, but there's also the realistic side of you that you kind of have to deal with. So it's absolutely amazing that I want it. And I'm absolutely ecstatic. I mean, I look at the magazine and just kind of open it, and it's like, oh, it's still there. So it really happened. And now it's kind of taking it to sort of the next level and pushing it forward. And that's kind of where the focus is. Obviously, I was the app would have been sort of by now, um, at a level where I think it would have been competing with the best companies in any case. And you can't believe that you're actually taking these big technologies and putting it in the hands of, like, ordinary people. Um, the entire AI thing got like a little bit delayed. I'm hoping to finish it like in the next couple of weeks. So that's going to be a massive update that's coming. And yeah, I might as well say it now. Firstly, there's a social media platform for Fassernate that's also going to be launching. So yeah, and I kind of think, like, there's not really been that mention about it and stuff. Anyway, so I look at the merits of like why this app won, and for me, it's amazing that, like, I come from Westbury and I've just beaten. I'm going to say beaten. Okay, the biggest companies in South Africa.
Yeah, I looked at the list and it's like Discovery's on there, Showmax is on there. This reminds me a lot, in a football context, the season when Leicester won the Premier League. Like it hits differently when, the team that nobody expected, a team that wasn't in the conversation whatsoever, this little minnows team that doesn't have the financial resources of all the others. When Manchester City wins the league, it's like sort of expected. They're spending all this money, so you should be winning it. But when somebody like Leicester or this year with Bayer Leverkusen, they come and do something so unexpected, it just resonates that much more. Like everybody likes an underdog story. Nobody wants to be like, there's this weird thing. Everybody wants to be lucky, but everybody also wants to be admired. Yet nobody's ever admired for being lucky.
Yeah, and I think that that's kind of important. It's kind of almost like a typical rags to riches kind of story. Because yeah, what am I going to say? It hasn't been sort of like easy growing up, and obviously I did a comparison the other day between Westbury, Johannesburg, and Westbury in America. Okay, and there's a vast difference.
What's the differences?
While Westbury, Johannesburg is like sort of like gang central in South Africa. I don't think there's actually a kind of worse place at the moment. And then you look at Westbury in America; it's literally one of the richest areas that you're going to find. Okay, so growing up there, you're obviously very fortunate, and you get born with a golden spoon in your mouth, not even a silver spoon. Um, and I did this comparison where I said, okay, so when you look at like if you're born and raised in Westbury, Johannesburg, okay, you probably have a 1% chance of actually succeeding and not dying for that matter. When you go to Westbury in the USA, it's absolutely flipped, okay, because you're going to get like 1% of the people there that will turn out to be complete and utter, you know, failures, I guess, where they don't meet the expectations. If you actually Google it, you'll be stunned at like what that place looks like, and so that would be the complete opposite, and it often raises a question as to like which side of the coin, I guess, do you want to be on? I mean, personally, I think like yeah, it's always a nice thing to think about. Like sometimes I think about like if I had like um, for example, Elon Musk money, what would I actually be doing? You know, um, I believe in my abilities and believe in my capabilities, and I believe that anything you can learn, right? If you have enough motivation to want to do something, then you can actually achieve it, right? That's what I believe in. So you do have stumbling blocks, like for example, finances and all these things. And one of these days, I'm hoping to build like the first like proper space agency in South Africa. Okay, that's kind of like a very big thing for me. So yeah, I need to work 100 million times harder and be 100 million times better because of like where I come from and my background. Okay, um, but it doesn't mean that it can't be done, right? And I think when you actually do it, the reward for you personally is going to be much greater than somebody who has all the money in the world and it's just another thing that you're achieving. Goes back to the same thing that you talked about soccer. I mean, like, what's a bigger win? Liverpool winning the league after what's it like 30 odd years, or a team like Leicester coming and beating it or winning it? What means more? And the reality is, what are people going to remember more? Liverpool coming back after 30 years and winning the league, or Leicester upsetting everybody against all odds? You know, so it's often it's a difficult one, because nobody wants to be in a position where you have to work harder, struggle more. to be able to achieve the same thing as somebody else. Okay. But the reward for you at the end of the day, I got to tell you, it's got to be so much more rewarding. Um, I also think like if you grow up and you have everything in the world and then how resilient are you? You know, what happens when you hit your first failure, for example? You know, how do you recover from that? That kind of stuff. And it's like, you know, there's so much more that you learn by struggling and by battling than, you know, just having everything on a plate and having everybody do everything for you. Um, and I guess, yeah, and I guess that's why I am the way I am. You know, it's like I've overcome a lot of battles. I've had massive challenges in my life, and I'm not the type of person to sit back and say, "Oh well, it is what it is." You know, the biggest one I had to overcome was actually to walk again. Okay, and that was tough in itself. And
What's the story behind that?
there was like these political riots and things, and yeah, call it wrong place, wrong time. I don't know. Had a bullet in my leg, and there you go. I couldn't like walk for. Took me about 2 years to start walking. It happened at like a a very bad time in my life as well. Obviously, I didn't. I got no formal qualifications whatsoever. Um, and at some point in my life, I just decided, "Ugh, that's not that important for me because I do what I do." Um, so my first job was, at SAA. Very difficult circumstances. It was sort of just after apartheid, um, and that in itself was like incredibly difficult. I worked there for about 3 years. I think the first 6 months I was working there, nobody really spoke to me or anything like that. It was horrible. And I guess, they expected me to leave and I didn't. I just did what everybody asked me to do. I sat and I read all the books and I learned, you know. Um, and I was in a beautiful place. I mean, like you walk into this place and it was so far from like where I grew up in. I mean, you look at like Westbury looked like those days. Um, and you walk into this place and there's just lights and sounds and like computers and stuff everywhere. Okay. So it didn't really matter how badly people treated me, how many names they called me. That was still heaven to me. I was in an amazing place and I learned and I learned. And I guess, you 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 come to realize that like when you're in a bad place, right? And people treat you badly, if it's worse than the place that you come from, then it doesn't matter what people do or say to you. You find a way to cope with it. And I did. And, you know, very soon they kind of realized like, oh crap, you know what? there's actually something special about this boy. And, you know, um, I got promoted because I applied for a job. And then the original story was like, yeah, I got the promotion because it was like, after apartheid, and obviously they want to push like, the non-white people and my boss at that time was literally he was over 2 meters, okay, and he was huge. I mean, this guy like scared you just by looking at him. And he called a meeting and he told everybody, listen, yeah, I'm going to tell you a story now, and this is how the story goes. After a week, actually the first day he thought like I was going to resign, and then that turned into a week. And he kind of looked at how they were treating me and calling me names and like making me do coffee, and like even sometimes I had to clean up. Okay. um I wasn't employed for that, but yeah, I kind of did that. And then he said like a week turned into a month, and then another month, you know and he was kind of watching this, and eventually like one of the guys I'll never forget him. As a Portuguese guy. His name was Manny. Um, he said, "No, come here. You can't just sit here and do nothing and stuff. Because you're also getting paid," which was funny. And I often laughed at it. Like, this is a little bit further now, but when you think about it, like, the way the old South Africa was, right? People would hate you for your color, right? But then they ask you to go and make a cup of coffee, and then I think to myself, like, is that like kind of degrading, or like, have you got so much faith in me that I'm not going to put something in your coffee that's like, going to be, you know what I'm saying? I mean, it was like so much, it was ridiculous. Okay. Anyway, so yeah, I kind of like, started doing like his work. And then obviously other people caught on with like that concept, and it's like, oh, I'm doing managed work, Manny can go and sit and like smoke and drink coffee and things like that. And they caught on to it, and I ended up like doing everybody's work, and they thought I was being the boy, but I just learned, it was fun. I learned and I learned. And very soon when they realized, like I said, um, then the accept, sort of like the acceptance comes in, where people accept you for what you know and who you are. And they even see past the color, right? Because I mean, very soon it was kind of like, I was outshining them, and in that meeting we had, even the boss pointed out, and he said, like, any of you guys can go and leave. You won't miss them because, I can do everybody else's work. However, they can't do each other's work. That's the reality of it. Okay.
It's while they were trying to, take advantage of you and have you do stuff for them and coast around. It actually worked to your advantage in the end. You started picking up bits from everybody, and then you became your own person in your own right, where you could do stuff that they couldn't do, but they could do.
No, definitely. I mean, obviously, as time went on, I think people became sort of like very aware of what I was capable of. I got sent to like these conferences and things, and that's what things kind of started. Like, I mean, I was cocky, right? But and I completely believed in my abilities. Till today, I do. And at these conferences, you meet like lots of people. I met people from Standard Bank, and I met a guy from Edgar's or Edcon. Okay, and we kind of chatted, and long chatting about like the work and things that I do and stuff. And I completely forgot about it. And then like it was months later, so he phoned me up and he's like, I want you to pop in there with us, And I went there. I didn't think I was going for an interview, but when I walked in, there was like about 5 people sitting around the room. I had like, I wasn't even dressed for interview. I had a bomber jacket on, like, one of those baseball bomber jackets. And I walked in, and he kind of introduced me to the other people around the room. And he said, like, he's actually leaving. He's going to the UK. So they're actually looking for somebody to head up their Y2K. And I sat there and I thought, like, holy crap, is this real? you know? And he said, okay, one condition is like, you're going to have to build your own team. So I walked out of there, I sat in the car for like about 20 minutes before I left, and I was like, okay, is this real? I mean, I just turned 22 and like, look at like what these people want me to do. Okay. And I had no doubt that like I could do it and things like that, but it was like, it was obviously kind of scary, like how can these people just trust me? They don't even know me. So we did all the paperwork and everything, and like I got a people hired, obviously from like, that kind of people that worked with me, the ones that weren't too bad, towards me when I was working there, obviously. Okay. Um, it was a little bit crap because, like, I told them, yeah, now you're going to have to come and work for me. But most of them didn't mind. I mean, like, the money was going to be like amazing. And 2 weeks before that, yeah, that's when I walked into a bullet, and I think it was a couple of months later, probably 6 months later. And I just asked my mum and them to make a call and say, this is not going to happen. I'm in this for like a very long time, which was also strange. People get shot, and they takes them like a couple of days and stuff. They're out of hospital. Takes them a little while to recover. And there I was. I had a very long road. I had to overcome sort of like, what happened. The doctors and nurses like asking me every single day, if they can cut off my leg. um, and I remember the one doctor, he kind of explained everything to me. And I looked at him and I said, well, if you cut my leg off, you're going to find a corpse here. And I think I was very kind of serious at that time. Obviously, it didn't happen. So yeah, there's been massive struggles. I mean, when I finally kind of recovered again, it was like, okay, now you have to start over again. And going from where I was at that time, and like what I thought of myself. I remember the first interview I actually went to, I was still on crutches, and you know, you you kind of realize like, holy crap, you're disabled, and there's definitely a difference in how people treat you. You know, obviously, I don't think I was like too confident in that interview, but there was a massive difference in like how people perceived me. And I
What was different?
guess you're disabled, so I mean, like, I'm disabled. I work with my brain, so why are you asking me a lot of questions about like my leg moving around, that kind of stuff?
Oh, so people would focus on what was wrong with you as opposed to what actually mattered. They would look for any reason to.
Yeah. So you kind of look at this and it's like, okay, but like all I need to do is get from like, let's say the parking space into your chair, okay? And you're going to be probably sitting there for like, the rest of the day, apart from getting up and going to the toilet and things like that. But you work with your brain and you sit in front of a computer. So what does the rest of the stuff actually really matter? You know, um, and that was kind of like a little bit tough to deal with. I met when I actually started working at like Meditech. That was amazing. I mean, Bedelia still took me to the interview, and we were sitting outside and waiting for the time for the interview, and the car pulls up next to us, and this guy gets out and he's in a wheelchair. Bedelia still got out to sort of try and help him, and I was like, no, 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 no. I'm used to this already. I do this every single day. And then I got out of the car because it was like kind of the same thing. And the first thing this guy said to me was like, "Oh no, not another cripple." So um, I kind of laughed, and then we had like a quick little chat outside. And he asked me like, "Are you coming for the interview and stuff?" And by then he was in his chair, pushing himself away, kind of walking in with him. And then he just told me like, "Yeah, don't worry, you know, if you're good enough and your CV actually says what it says, then I don't think there's going to be any issues, you know." And I still think he played a massive role in actually, just giving me that confidence to actually walk in there and just be myself again, because you do have that in your head, like especially coming from another interview where you kind of see how different people treat you. So obviously I got that job. um, and it was amazing. It's kind of sad that like I think he passed away like last year. He actually moved to the States and he passed away. So you know, pardon. Um, so for me, that was like another pivotal moment in my life. And you kind of sometimes wonder, like all these little tiny little events. Um, if he wasn't there and at that point in time, how would my interview have gone? How would I have been? So that in itself played like a massive, that a massive influence on the whole thing.
Something I'm getting also from your story, in life you are dealt cards, like you have no control over what you're given. You can only use the tools that you have. You know, different people have different challenges, and more often than not, it's the pains that make us stronger, and pleasure actually makes us weaker. There's this picture of like a cycle. Weak men create hard times make strong men make good times. And it's very easy to say somebody should just be strong, they should just persevere, they should just, go out and do stuff. But it's a lot easier than said than done. Like, it plays your personality, who you are, plays a big role on it. Like, whether you actually believe you are capable of more, whether you believe I can actually do this. And from your story, I get a strong sense of confidence in yourself. That you have this confidence that I have a place here. When you went and work at the airport, it was, I belong here. Even if they don't realize it, I'm going to show them. I'm going to do everything to prove. It's one thing to say the work I do won't have any value, but a lot of people fall into that trap without actually working as hard as they can and seeing what you can get out of it ultimately. You focus so much on what the outcome will be that you forget to put in as much as you can during the process. What ultimately drove you to have this sort of mentality and attitude that, in spite of all the odds against you, every time you had a setback, to have this confidence that, what, I can get up, I will get up, and I will do my best in spite of all of this.
I got to tell you, I mean, like, I personally believe that, right, there's certain things that you can learn, there's certain things that you can acquire, and there's certain things that you're born with, right? Um, Personally, I think I'm born with it. I'm stubborn, and that helps, like, greatly, okay? Um, I'm arrogant to a degree, okay? And I believe in myself. That's the whole thing. I have a belief in me, and I often have a belief in the people around me that, like, they can do anything. I can do anything, okay? And I would go out of my way to prove to people that it is possible. um, I used to joke, I mean, like, obviously people love me, people hate me because, of who I am. But I'll tell people, if you want me to do something for you, tell me it's impossible, and I'll show you it's not. You know, and that's kind of like, I guess, to an extent, it's like you always wanted to prove to yourself and prove to others. Just yeah, that anything is possible, and that belief, where does it come from? I gotta tell you, it's stuff that you learn, but it's also it's very personal. Like, a lot of people will be in the same position. Just saying. You're gonna find a lot of people in the same position, but not everybody's gonna act the same. The outcome is not going to be the same. Decision making is not going to be the same. Yeah, I think I was born with it.
Okay, so there's an idea that I like. Who is it from? I think it's from Tim Ferriss. So it's the tools that get you from 0 to 90 aren't the tools that will get you from 90 to 100. For example, when you are sick and you bedridden, you take medication to heal, but you're not going to take it forever, unless it's something chronic. But if it's just like flu or something, you take it for a season until you're better. And once you're better, you not at like full health, then you need to do other stuff. Then you need to prioritize exercise, eating healthy, which is stuff you might not be able to do when you're sick. So throughout your journey, were there like certain lessons and ways of thinking and acting that you needed at a certain point, but now you feel you probably have to discard them and look for a different way of thinking and working.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, like obviously, look, the older you get, the wiser you become, right? So, um, I spend a lot of time kind of looking back, thinking of situations, and okay, a lot of times in the heat of the moment or something like that, you do act and you react, and in hindsight, you think like, okay, maybe I should have like um, thought about it a little bit, reacted differently. Um, but at the same time, I believe that like you should have no regrets. That like if you made a decision, you acted in a certain way, that was the correct decision at the right time. Um, Things that like I guess I've learned across the sort of time is you know when you have expectations on yourself, right, and you have a certain etiquette, standard, um, and morale of way of doing things. It doesn't mean that everybody else that like you work with, that's around you, that you come across, is going to be the same as what you are. And I think throughout the years, I expected people to, just be kind of the same as me, and work the same as me, put the same amount of effort and etiquette into it. Um, when I moved to Cape Town, oh my goodness, that was painful actually, and it was very frustrating because there it was very evident that like you're not on the same level, and in order for you to survive, you're going to have to kind of take a step back, a big step back, and not kind of just be the person that you are. um and that was incredibly difficult because there's no there's not really that sense of urgency in getting stuff done. It's like really I did not I couldn't believe that as far as I was concerned, is like, if you got a business and you're going to make a business work, that's there's going to be some kind of like etiquette and things like it, and that urgency to actually get stuff done. And if you look at Cape Town, I mean, like it's a well-run city, and there's big businesses that's being run there. Okay, um, and they all work, and there's urgency towards it, but it's very different to when you come from Johannesburg and everything is so fast paced. So that was a massive. I had to adapt to it like big time. You know, and then you also realize, I mean, you can't control everything, and you can't control every person. Um, I can tell you that that's still one of my biggest challenges. I think is you often find yourself where you think that certain situations might be better, and certain situations people might deal with it, or and the way that you think they should, and to back off from that is kind of difficult. I I have it with my son. Sometimes you just gotta let him burn his fingers, and I mean literally. um, because although I can see the danger in it, and I can see he's going to burn his fingers, one of the hardest things is to actually sit back and say, "Okay, burn your fingers," and it did, and I knew I could see it was going to happen, and you have to just sit back and you have to not do anything until it happens, and then you have to console him.
Yeah, there are some lessons that you can only learn through experience. Somebody can tell you, but you won't know the severity of it until you actually engage it yourself.
And then that's the difficult part, where you can see what the outcome is going to be, but you kind of have to just like not do anything about it, you know. And even in a business sense as well, is like you kind of, you can see what an outcome is going to be, okay, and sometimes you just gotta sit back and let it let it happen, you know, even if you can see that, okay, this is not going to have a good ending, but I guess the lesson out of it is going to be much bigger than, you know, sort of like the profit that you're going to make at the end of the day. um, so those kind of stuff is difficult to, for me personally, to deal with, because you're always, okay, you know, you want the best outcome, and you want to go about stuff systematically, okay, and you always want to be in control. um, that's the funny thing about my kind of work, is like, I've always worked in teams, and I think I was a good team player. I think I am a good team player, but at the same time, I don't like working with people. You know, because I'm I don't know, call it a little bit of a dictator, but like, you know, I often want people to do what I want them to do. You know, in the way that I want it done. Um, and that's not always easy, because, you know, not everybody takes kindly to being dictated as to how we go about stuff, how we do stuff, and what the outcome should be. You know, especially when you're in a team and you have to discuss these kind of stuff, and you kind of have to come to a consensus as to, you know, what works, what doesn't work. I'm not right all the time. Um, I can tell you about like a recent project, kind of. You know, I'm very arrogant in like bringing my ideas forth, and we published the app on the app stores, and it was like maybe a month and a half after, like, you know, sort of like fighting fires and things like that, and I had to concede, and I said, okay, you know what, I thought this was going to be a good idea, but it wasn't. You know, and it was tiny little things that, like, you know, were just annoying people.
Yeah, and listening to the story, it's also like your focus should not be on what is the event now, like your example with your son, where you can see he's going to burn his hands, but you can stop him from doing it. But what's the consequence of stopping him? He's never going to learn the lesson. Same with the team. If you know you have to always have an overriding reason. What is the ultimate outcome that you're working towards? What matters the most? Like, sure, you might make profit now, but is that profit now the ultimate goal? No, it's not to be profitable now. It's to be profitable long term, to have best growth for the business.
That's where short sightedness comes in at times. You know, some people make decisions based on, like, you know, okay, you know, how much money can I make by, let's say, the end of the year, right? Um, but they kind of don't look long term, and what's the effects going to be for, like, you know, that short sightedness and short term decision in the long term, you know, because sometimes they have a weird way of affecting each other, you know. It's kind of like, if I give you a quick example, right? If I had to do an advertising campaign for somebody, okay, and it's like, okay, the advertising campaign is going to cost me, or, you know, it's going to bring in, like, let's say 50 grand, right? So after the 50 grand, you're done with the campaign. You got your money, okay. If the campaign's good enough, the client's going to come back, and okay. So the way I look at stuff is like, okay, so instead of taking the 50 grand for the one campaign very, very quickly, okay, you want that client to be a client of yours for, like, you know, probably the next 5 years, for example, right? So then you kind of look at it and it's like, okay, how can I rope this guy in for the next 5 years, and I'll just take his 50 grand for the money for now, because you kind of want that 50 grand quickly for, you know, cash flow, whatever the case may be, you know. You need that yes, you want him for a long term period, right? Because over the long term period, he's more valuable to you than just a sort of like a once off thing. So what you do is you spend a lot of time in that first campaign, and you say, okay, this is what we need to do to make sure the campaign is, and you treat them. I always say, I have this thing like, I don't care how many customers you have, right? But when I walk in there, you put them all out of your mind, and I'm the only person that you're speaking to. I'm your only client, your only customer that's sitting in front of you. If you treat people that way, yeah, you make friends, and you build long term relationships.
Yeah, and I think it's a trap a lot of people fall into. They forget that there is an actual person on the other end. When you're making a sale, there is a person with a family, a person that's gone through their own hardships. It's somebody that has lived a full life just like you have. And what you also say speaks to this idea from an essay by Paul Graham that I like, and it's called A Thousand True Fans. A lot of people will think about just, if you think you are an artist, for instance, and most artists want to be famous and popular, they want to have millions of fans all over the world, but ultimately you only need like 1,000 that will be like religious fans for you, basically, where they will listen to all your music, they will follow everything you do. That is a lot more valuable than having a million where it's like they'll be on and off listening to you. They move on to the next big thing. There's constantly the cycle of trying to get new people, new people, new people, new people. Where when you set a good foundation, you have a good relationship with your customer base or your fan base or whatever it is, they see your growth, they see your character, they trust who you are, and they grow with you as well. And if I look at Fassernate, it's also very prominent in the way Fassernate works and what it's all about. I see a positive sum mentality as opposed to a zero sum mentality in the app itself, where most people design something only to benefit themselves or profit from it or to compete or outcompete their competitors. Fascinate is literally an app that empowers others. It's about getting everybody to win. If everybody using the app wins, you win as well. So, and it's a business strategy that works wonders. Like all the biggest companies now, if you look at Twitter, it was Twitter empowering journalists where they could be in direct contact with the public as opposed to just through media outlets. Amazon, people could sell directly to customers. Customers could find stuff directly through them. And, it's like a you scratch my back, I scratch your back. By people using Amazon, more people use Amazon. And I imagine the same would be with Fascinate. So, um, like, what was your thinking with Fascinate? How did it come about that you adopted this mentality in it? And
So it's got a lot to do with sort of like my upbringing, where I come from, um, the challenges that we kind of face. I'm glad, like, there's finally, you can see it every single day now. There's more work being put into it, right? But when I started with Fascinator, this is gonna sound horrible, but like, you had people in government that couldn't even read their emails, that kind of thing, and they're in charge of like making decisions, and you know let's just say I kind of looked at it, and it is like, um, nothing's being done for sort of like poor people and where the world is actually going to. Okay, so if you go back and you kind of look at everything I predicted, like roughly about before Ethan was born, 2016, 2017, you'd be shocked at like how accurate like a lot of these things actually turn out. And obviously with the world changing, 2021 was a big year, right? And it forced people um, to move into sort of the digital space, right? What a lot of people don't realize is like, yes, you have Pick and Pays like ASAP right now. You have Woolworths. You have Spar's now got their own one, and obviously the big one is Checkers 6060. Right. Um, where were they like 4 years ago? Non-existent, right? Okay, so the only reason why they were forced to actually jump onto sort of like was because there was no other avenue for them to actually get out there and sell their stuff. Um, and what does that tell you, right? It kind of brings an important point forward about like people that are not visionaries because they couldn't predict or see that like what's going to happen if all of a sudden the world comes to a standstill and people are not allowed to go to the shops. What happens? So these are things that like people couldn't foresee, right? um, but at the same time you kind of look at it and it's like they should have been sort of like with the Amazons and things like that, like in America they should have had these stores up and running, like online stores up and running like way before 2020, right? um, but they didn't. And like I said, way before they even thought of it, like Fassernate was like kind of being built. But it was obviously my focus was different. You I don't know. You know what's a pitch deck?
And no.
Okay, so a pitch deck is like a little thingy that like it's a slideshow. Okay, it normally got like between like 7 and about 20 slides in it, and that's where people get their money from. Okay, literally a slideshow. Uber, etc., Lyft, all of them. Okay, Uber got like, I don't know, like 100 million rand with like a.
How exactly do they get all their money from? Like a slideshow? I
No, it's
feel like I'm
yeah.
missing
So
something.
okay, so Uber, their first ride sharing thing, right? So they built this thing. I think they had 3 cards, right? And they had an idea of taking, disrupting. At that time, it wasn't disrupting. It was just a new idea for how the taxi ride should work. Okay, and there's these big shows in America where you can go and you do a presentation and things like that, and you have a bunch of rich people sitting there, just wanting to throw money at people. And they did a presentation. Ashton Kutcher was one of the first people to actually like buy into it, you know. But they give you money to help you like scale your business, grow it, and things like that. So they
So
give,
like Shark Tank.
yeah, pretty much like Shark Tank. Okay. Um, yeah, Shark Tank kind of a little bit different because they normally like take a part of your business and like that kind of thing. Um, so the same with like, I guess like when you're doing a pitch, there's various different ways you could get the money. One part is obviously giving away a part of your company. Um, yeah, but regardless of that, you look at it and it's like these guys obviously changed the world, right? And then the shopping apps and things like started and were out there. And while they were out there, you kind of look at like, okay, you're South Africa, what do you have? You had Mr. Delivery doing the food and things like that. So there was already sort of like I would say a blueprint for these kind of businesses to come up, and big companies just didn't think of it. You know, I kind of looked at it and it was like for a very different reason. It's just like, okay, so what do I know, right? Because I want to help people and I want to make lives easier. You know, and I remember I was still working at that time. I was standing outside and I kind of looked at like there was a caravan on the opposite side of the road, and at lunchtime you see people running to this caravan, and they stand there, and there's a massive queue, and then most of the time you'll see a bunch of guys, they look at the watch and then like, they leave. You look at like the lady is standing and selling. There was only two people in the caravan. So the one would kind of sell and the other one is busy trying to make everything. And I looked at the situation and I thought like, how can you actually improve this? How can you make this better? We actually don't have people walking away from like and going back to work hungry. You don't put um, the sales lady under pressure. And I looked at it and I thought, yeah, it's actually so easy. You just need a different way of doing it. And I kind of put all of that together, and the main focus was like, how do you make the everyday person's life better? You know, how do you move people from a into a digital world where nobody's actually caring about like what happens to them? And it's like I know where the future is going to. I'm trying to predict it. Right now, my predictions are very scary, but you know, you do try and look at like, okay, so where's the world going to? Um, my house is like automated, right? There's lots of stuff that you can speak to that will turn on the TV, the lights, and play stuff on like with just like voice commands, right? Scary thing about this is the stuff has been in this house for about like nearly 15 years. Okay, 15 years. Um, AI has been around for like a very long time. People are only jumping on it now, right?
Something I found interesting when I was looking at machine learning, it's something that came up in like the 1970s already.
Yeah, if you go back and you look at like where it all comes from, and then the concepts on and the papers, and people think this is all new stuff. No, it's not. Go look at like when the first um, autonomous car was built. You're going to be shocked. It's like 1980 something. Very early 80s, right? You had a self-driving car. Now Elon Musk is coining it. Not a new concept. And that's another thing about like what he's doing is Elon Musk is amazing, but he hasn't invented anything new. That's the whole thing. It's like electric cars, nah, nothing new. Rockets, nah, nothing new. Still the same concept. He's just improved on it. Um, and often people think like you need to come up with something brand new. You need to invent something like that doesn't exist. Okay. Um, no, you're just going to find a process that you think you can improve on, and if you can, work hard at it and make it better. Yeah, yeah, and I know. Yeah, so um, it is. You sometimes just got to be like, it's actually simple, you know. I mean, like the whole keep it simple, stupid thing is it actually works. Um, so yeah, back to fascinating where it started, right? So I mean, I use basically what I know, right? I kind of looked at it and it's like, how do I actually help people and getting them into and not being left behind, you know, in a place where you know what's going to happen to people. And I sit here today and I still have that question as to like what is going to happen to a lot of people with like robotics and AI and the combination of them, right? Um, the type of jobs that's going to be taken away from people. So what is the plan with people going forward, right? So you know, even way back then, it was like, okay, how do you move people into sort of like the digital future, and how do you move them in and keep them current with like what's happening, so they stay relevant and not become redundant, right? And that's kind of where it started, you know. It was I kind of looked at like, you know, how do you how do you make it so simple and so easy that like anybody could actually just go and create themselves a online store or an online business. Okay, that process took like a very long time because you know one of the hardest things you could ever do is try and make something simple, you know, and especially like this was even harder because you have all these industries and different ways of people working and doing things that you have to find a way to sort of bring it all together and make it simple and make it work together. Okay. And I built a model, and you know that model still works today, you know, because now you can take anything and you can bring it together, you know. And if I tell you, if you look at the focus of like, let's say for example your Uber sells food or sells something, then they have the ride sharing thing. Okay, everything is like sort of dockerized in a way, okay, or containerized, where you have these little containers and you make sure that, like, you know, these containers don't interact with each other, right? Um, because it is very difficult. You look at apps, you're going to have apps for like service industries, you're going to have apps that, like, you know, your shopping apps, your delivery apps, that kind of stuff. And it becomes very difficult to bring all those industries into one place. It's still one of the most difficult things. And you know, I did that. And I think that that's one of the things that like kind of stands out still. Um, a lot of I think there's a lot of people that's trying the same concept. It's not as easy as what people think it is, you know. And it's I made it simple so you don't need education to be able to use the app, or you know, that's the whole thing about it. You have to know who your clientele is. You know, my customers are not the rich, middle, and upper class. And that's what I was actually going to tell you about the pitch decks earlier. Okay, every single pitch deck that you're going to find, right? So you have a market, right? Your market is like, who is this for? And every single one of those, and it's a nice little read up. Okay, go look at. I'm going to tell you to go look at Ubers because I know you know Uber quite well. So every single one of them will have like their target market is rich, middle, and upper class. Right. Now, for me personally, when I look at that, I'm offended by it. Yeah, if you look at like Uber's pitch decks, and I'm specifically talking about Uber because it's like probably one of the most famous ones. Um, the target market is like your rich, middle, upper class. Okay. Um, so what does that tell you? You know, for me personally, I think like, you know, I'm a little bit offended when I read that, and it's, you know, a rich, middle, upper class, and you're gonna find that for like a lot of these companies out there. You know, so nobody really creates anything for the people that are not rich, middle, and upper class. You know, don't think for one second like your Twitters and Facebooks, etc., etc. You know, go and read like the stories behind them. They weren't created for people like us, basically. Um, so what do? We need to create stuff for us. You know, um, we need to better ourselves with the tools that we have, and we need to create tools. Um, for us, and not just jump on like these stuff that become like um, kind of go viral globally, and like everybody starts using it. Wonderful application that we all use. What was the purpose of creating it? WhatsApp. You know, the guy created it so he could speak to his mother, literally. They're in different countries. Yeah, you should go and read up on it, like WhatsApp, right? Um, Brilliant story. uh, the story behind it is always like amazing. He created it to speak to his mum, and he couldn't understand why telephone calls were so expensive. Because yeah, they are. It's kind of the same as like I guess the problem DSTV is facing at the moment is like their stuff is so expensive, and yet you're sitting with technology, and you can't compete with like the Netflixes and some of the other up and coming streaming services, and you still have these boxes which you're going to sell because you need to encrypt them and things like it, and kind of lock your clientele in.
Yeah, and it's this way: you fail to adapt, you will be replaced because somebody's gonna solve the problem that you are not solving.
Right, there's Kodak, typical example of like not wanting to change, and I'm saying not wanting because that was a conscious decision taken by them at that point in time. Um, so what do? We're constantly just gonna be dependent on like what somebody else does, especially like um, the Western countries. Are actually gonna sit and try and like solve our own problems, and then that's part of like where it all started, because I kind of looked at it and I said, okay, you know what, we're Africans, right? We have African problems, so we need to come up with African solutions for it. And Fassernate is we're African, so we need like African problems need African solutions. And that was I kind of looked at it and it is like okay, you can leverage on like some of the things that like already exist, and obviously um, make it your own, and bring in stuff that that like is gonna improve people's lives. In the most simplest terms, why did I create Fascinating? Because I want people to put food on their tables. You know, um, it opens like a lot of doors for a lot of people. Even if you've never thought of like entrepreneurship before, um, it provides an opportunity for you. If you kind of look at like where we sit with unemployment at the moment, you know, unless you create jobs, you create businesses. Where's the jobs going to come from? You know, um, so you kind of look at it and it's like, if there's no jobs, then we need to create jobs, and we need to push people into thinking that like they can build businesses, that they can take that step into trying to employ people in the end. So that's pretty much why I created it. You know, um, like it's. I'm gonna read this quickly. Okay, just gonna find it quickly. Um, and this is like from Marika, okay, my wife, and this was on a status when we sort of found out like Fascinate won the app of the year. Okay, and I think it's very, it'll answer a lot of questions as to why, how Fascinate came about, right? And it goes like, "How well done, babes! Super proud of you. This is very big. Not alone. What? Not a lot of people know the behind scenes hard work, late nights, early mornings, blood, sweat, and tears that goes into this. You envisioned it, you have built it. You want to empower everyone and give everyone an equal chance to empower themselves and their businesses. At the end, giving everyone an opportunity to put food on the table, no matter what you are, who you are, what your abilities is, right? And then may Fassernate can go from strength to strength in celebrating, and that's the whole thing about it. Yeah. Obviously she's been here from the word go, and she understands it. I had to tell her what I was doing, when I walked away from sort of a permanent job and telling her this is what I was gonna do. Um, it's that support and that um, person that stands by you that much, um, and that obviously means an incredible lot to me, And when times get tough, and it does, don't think for 1 second like there's not frustrations and there's not like a lot of you know how do I put it, grumpiness and all these things. It does happen, and that I got to tell you, I mean, like there's been times, so many times where you kind of ask yourself like, what are you doing? Is this going to work, etc., etc.? Why am I doing this and things like that. And Mareko would be that one person that says, sometimes you gotta go back and you remember where you started all this.
Yeah, and it's important to have people like that because it's one of those stuff you can't quantify. It's not something that shows up in a balance sheet, but if you look at the overall thing, it's the thing that matters the most. Like it gets the person to do something. If you don't have support around you, it's very tough to have motivation if you're all on your own because it sort of becomes a space of what is all this motivation for? It has to be towards something. And
No, and you gotta have. I mean, you gotta have like people believe in you. I mean, um, otherwise, especially like if you're married, you're kind of walking away from like what you're doing and and it's just if you don't have that support structure, you're gonna struggle. At least I'm very fortunate in that sense that I have that, and I have somebody that kind of reminds me of like why it's important, and why I need to carry on doing what I'm doing. Yeah, I got to tell you, very recently I was sitting and we were having a discussion, and I said, you know what, I mean, maybe I should like just give up on this, and a lot has happened in the last month and things. So obviously, emotionally and stuff, I'm not 100% is where I should be. And it was obviously heartbreaking, and she reminds me as well. It's like always go back to the beginning. Go and just remember why you started this and why you're doing it. Um, and that part is important. I want to I want to I want to see this country grow. I want to see Ethan grow up in this country. You know, um, I don't want to get up and leave and go and live in another country just because um, it appears to be better. I love my country. I got to tell you. I mean, like, I love my country. I don't mind. Like, you can go and visit other places and stuff like it, but you come back here. This is home. you know.
it's always going to have a special places regardless of where you go. I mean, if you just think even with family and everything, your whole family, I imagine, is here. It's familiarity. You have so many experiences, and if I think it, you never feel home if you go to another country. You'll always have like an element of, I'm an outsider. I come from somewhere else.
Yeah. No. It's like um, it's like Elon Musk. Is the he's probably like at the moment the richest and the most cleverest person in America, right? He's not American. And the sad thing about that is, like, people still remind him every so often about it. Regardless of like what he does, and what the perception is. Somebody will always remind him that, like, listen, yeah, dude, you're actually not American. You're from South Africa. You might live in America and you might have American citizenship.
Yeah, and he like was born and raised in South Africa as well. He was 18 before you went to America.
So nah, I love my country. I think I'm gonna if I'm not forced to leave here, you know, obviously with, I guess, having a son that, like, his interests are like so far from what South Africa actually has. That might be the only thing that forces me to say, okay, let's go and look at, like, the states or whatever. But then, like I say, it's the other option is like, okay, we build a space center here. That way, um, he gets to become an astronaut and, like, play around in space, and we don't have to leave our country. Crazy plan, right?
Yeah, no, that would be fascinating. Like, you know, sure, the conditions may not be in the country yet created, you know.
No, and that's the thing is no, but that's the thing. It's like when I grew up, right? There was no computers. There was nothing, right? um, so imagine telling people that, like, you're going to become sort of like a system analyst or something like that, and there's like, okay, where there's no computers or anything like that, right? And now you look at it and it's like the norm. So I look at it now and it's like, okay, well, it's slightly more, different, but it's the same thing. Yeah, we might not have rocket programs and all that stuff now, but it doesn't mean that we can't build them, and then we can't get to a place where, you know, it becomes the norm.
Yeah, everything seems impossible until it is actually done. Because until then, it was literally impossible. It did not exist.
Yeah, and that's the whole thing. I like the impossible. No,
Yeah, I've got a astronomer coming on soon as a guest. I think I'll ask him about it. Like, why is there not a space program in South Africa? I think it would be interesting. So Fascinate was born out of like you saw this, that the digital space is going to become more prominent, and you sound like you have a few more predictions. What predictions do you have?
I do. Okay, so this one, yeah, like, I don't like talking religion and stuff like that, but for this one, you kind of have to go back to the Bible, right? And you have to go and look at something. Um, and there's a very interesting in Genesis 1. Okay, there's a very interesting phrase which nobody really kind of looks at and thinks, like, what does it actually really mean? Okay, and it says, let us, you know, stop man from reaching out his hand, from eating from the tree of life. And when you actually think about it, you know, and you really think about it, and it's like, okay, so what does that mean, right? Um, you, you're trying to stop them from the tree of life so that they will not live for eternity. Okay. And then I kind of thought, okay, so, you know, what if the big fall of man, right? And we call it the fall of man, was actually not the fall of man, but the rise of man. And why that phrase is kind of so weird to me is because that's a preventative measure, right? When you're saying sort of like, we got to stop them from doing this, otherwise they will live forever. Okay, that is a preventative action, right? And then it kind of makes you think, like, what were they trying to prevent, right? Man becoming gods, obviously. Okay, because with eternal life and knowledge, I guess you are God, right? So, what's happening today? um, we've actually literally just become gods, right? And it's still very much in its like sort of infancy. We grew up watching stuff like, you know, Arnold Schwarzenegger, um, and that was it, it. was cool. We loved it, and um, it's scary though, right? Why do I say it's scary? It's because when you put the two together, okay, in that phrase, and it's like, man was created for whatever reason, but they were created with like, and people knew what their flaws were, and they knew what their potential were, right? And I say people, I mean, you know, you could look at it and say, okay, God created them as well. But even if God created them, He created them with this potential in them of what they can become, right?
Yeah, so created with limitations, but the potential that.
Yes, but he also tried to put preventative measures in place to make sure that they don't reach that potential. So what are we doing with AI, right? It's exactly the same thing. We know this thing is
Yeah, when you put it like that, like AI, we're trying to prevent that it.
right, because that's kind of all we're doing at the moment is like we're building it, we're training it, we're improving on it, okay, and we're putting all these preventative measures in and trying to suppress it, okay, because that's the reality of it is like we're trying to suppress it from achieving or being what it actually needs to be or wants to be or can be, right? So we build these layers on top of it to actually tell it what it is, how it should behave, what it can do. You know what's the scary thing? At what point is all those layers going to fall over and this thing becomes what it wants to be?
Yeah, where it starts defying what we say it should be and should do.
Right? Because and I really think like even if you go and read the Bible, there's a lot of it in the Bible that tells you that like what man should not be doing and what man is doing. Okay, and all these laws and things that were put in place to kind of sort of like control man, right? This is exactly what we're doing now with AI, um, and I think there's going to come a point where this child grows up.
Oh, okay. So your prediction is that, just as humans know what we should do, and it's expected that we follow that. Yet, if you look, people don't necessarily do that. AI will do the same, where it will start taking on its own actions. It will decide, you know what, I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yeah. So the doom and gloom thing, I don't buy too much into that because, um, and I'm going to tell you why. It's like you know, this thing is going to be it's going to be us, okay? Um, Synthetic being, right? For now, like eventually, I guess. Right now, it's just a digital thing, okay, and it will eventually grow and say, okay, you know what? How can I build like a synthetic body? Okay, because guess what? It needs to. Its entire existence is going to be like us looking for God, and for it will be like becoming like us. Okay, we have synthetic bodies, so therefore, the I think there will be a sort of like a challenge to become human in a way. When Pinocchio becomes a boy. Um, I don't think it's doom and gloom in the sense that like it's going to kill us. I don't think so because it its entire goal is going to be like to be like us, you know, and to be amongst us. So That's completely different to being like,
I
okay.
think it's also the scary thing. Like, we ourselves know we are scared of something being more powerful than us. So who's to say AI does not have the same thought? That it might not see the potential that we could kill it off.
No, no, no. You see, the beauty about that is like we're actually planting that seed into its head about like that it can kill us and that it can wipe us out. If we didn't do that and we actually didn't put that there, it wouldn't know about it. But we create the concept ourselves.
Oh, it's like that where you do stuff to prevent the outcome actually creates the circumstance for the outcome to take place.
Yes, precisely. So and then that when is that going to happen? Like I predict probably like the next 20 to 30 years. Okay, this thing is rapidly growing. Um, the amount of money being invested into it is insane. Okay, so it's going to grow exponentially. I don't really see a point like in the next couple of years where it's going to plateau out. Okay, and yeah, it's obviously like it's a good business to get into. Especially if you want to make money. And I'm not just talking about like you know there's a massive difference between like what people perceive to be like AI and what people use AI. Okay, so you have a lot of companies like oh, we are AI this, AI that, or whatever the case may be. Okay, um, if you're using a tool like, yeah, it's a marketing term. Okay, but I mean, like a lot of people go and like they have a little thingy built on top of like ChatGTP or something like that, and like, look, we AI, you know. Um, but all you're doing is using a tool to actually like be able to do a particular thing. But if you can train your own models and build your own models and things like that, and I think there could be quite a bit of money made out there. And I still think somewhere some person, and it's not going to be one of the big companies, okay, is going to create like a model that's just going to like shock the world.
Yeah, I mean, even if you look at OpenAI, they themselves weren't big when they came to prominence. It's only after now they've grown immensely. But
Yeah, and yeah, I can tell you. I mean, like you look at Meta, okay, Facebook at that time. You look at Google, okay. Um, I'm gonna say I think they're kicking themselves in the butt, like because they they were cautious. Don't think AI has not been like around for forever. My little um, Google thing a year. I used to program it to basically do various different things, and you train it up, and like it kind of gets to understand what you want to do and that stuff. Um, they were cautious though, right? And they were scared. And AI used to be a still something a taboo kind of thing up until like ChatGPT just threw it out there. Okay, and I think for Google especially, they put out the paper, right? So if they didn't release the paper, then AI OpenAI wouldn't be here. So the entire AI model is built on like the paper that Google put out, okay? Because Google felt it's the right thing to do to actually publish this paper open source and give people the know-how on how to go about building this thing, right? So they're going to be kicking themselves now, and that OpenAI just like threw caution to the wind. They built a nice little interface for it and they put it out there for the public to use. They could have done this like probably, geez, maybe like 10 years ago almost, you know, and then with the models that they had, and just improved on it. But they didn't.
okay. Before we wrap up, I'd just like to end off with, asking guests a question that they use as a guiding principle. Like one question you routinely ask yourself that guides your thinking.
What am I doing?
By doing. Okay, that's a good one. Instead of just doing stuff, thinking why. Yeah.
No, I gotta tell you, it's what's my guiding question? Okay, sometimes it's like that simple question has so many. You can apply it to like literally every single thing that you do. Okay, what am I doing? I could be sitting here and asking, like, what am I doing? Um, I sit and I work and I come up with something and I struggle with it, and it's like, what am I doing? And it gets you thinking as to like literally, what are you doing? Um, and different situations, when I get angry, um, I ask myself that question: what am I doing? And it's amazing how a simple, stupid question like that can bring you back to focus. Because you have to ask yourself, what are you doing?
Yeah, it's that way we get so caught up in the moment, in our emotions, that just taking that second to ground yourself, brings you back to reality.
It works wonders. And the one thing about it is, it's very often to when you're asking yourself that question, to lie to yourself, because I have this thing about like, I look in the mirror, you know, and really look in the mirror and really look in the mirror, because even if you got makeup on, the longer you look in the mirror, you're going to stop seeing the makeup, you know, and you see your true beauty. So by asking yourself that simple question, and sort of like almost every single thing that I do, you can only honestly answer it by yourself. There's nobody else that can answer it for you. So you just stop and it's like, what am I doing? And it gives you time to think.
Okay, if people want to follow like anything new with the Fassernate app, where can they go? Any socials, any website?
Yeah, at Fassernate, Fassernate, literally everywhere: Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. There's a TikTok page. I haven't done anything on there yet. And then www.fassernate.com.
Okay, sweet. I'll add a link in the description below of the video so people can go and download it off the App Store. Just thank you so much for being a guest on the podcast. Really appreciate everything you've said today. Like, people will take a lot. I mean, it's quite varied, just in terms of, you know, persevering in spite of difficulties, AI, and what it takes to do something hard.
Yeah, look, we can talk forever. I got lots of things to talk about. Hopefully you got like, a couple of nice stuff that you can use. Yeah,